The wind howled through the open highway as a group of rugged bikers roared past the diner parking lot, leather jackets gleaming under the fading orange sky. Their laughter carried far, deep, loud, and wild, the kind that made strangers shrink away. But that day, it wasn't fear they left behind. It was silence. Because among the engines and echoing voices, there stood a teenage girl in an oversized, worn-out jacket. It wasn't the jacket that caught their attention, it was the patch stitched unevenly on its back, a patch that would change the way they looked at her, and themselves. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen stories, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub, where every story reminds us that compassion can rewrite even the harshest moments. Her name was Maya, 16 years old, quiet and thin as the wind itself. The diner where she stood wasn't just a pit stop, it was her safe place. She worked there after school, serving coffee and cleaning tables, saving every dollar she could. Her jacket was old, too big, faded at the edges, with one sleeve torn. People noticed, sometimes snickered, but she didn't care. It wasn't just fabric. It was her father's jacket, the one he wore every day before he left for his final ride and never came back. That day, as the rumble of engines filled the air, Maya froze for a second. The bikers, big bearded men with skull helmets and leather vests, had pulled over, laughing, stretching, and lighting cigarettes. One of them pointed at her jacket and smirked. "Hey, little Miss Biker wannabe, that thing's older than you." The group burst out laughing, their deep voices cutting through the chilly air. Maya's face flushed, and she turned away, pretending not to hear. She wiped her hands on her apron and went inside. But the laughter followed her like an echo she couldn't escape. Inside, she leaned against the counter, her breath trembling. She'd grown used to judgment, classmates whispering, customers making remarks, people thinking she was strange. But something about those men mocking her father's jacket hurt in a different way. Because they didn't know what it meant. They didn't know that the patch on the back wasn't a decoration, it was a memory, a symbol stitched with pain and pride. Outside, the laughter started to die down. One of the older bikers, Tom, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen too much, noticed something on the back of Maya's jacket as she walked toward the trash bins. The patch was frayed, but the words were still clear. "In loving memory, Sergeant Daniel Brooks, U.S. Army veteran, 1978-2019. Below it was a small embroidered emblem of wings and a motorcycle wheel, the kind used by veterans who had ridden for fallen soldiers. Tom's cigarette slipped from his fingers. The laughter stopped. Every man in that group went quiet as the realization sank in. The jacket they'd mocked wasn't a joke, it was her father's, a soldier's jacket. A hero's jacket. Maya came back inside and saw them staring through the window. Her heart pounded. She didn't know what they'd seen, but she felt something shift in the air, something heavy, almost sacred. When she stepped outside again, they weren't laughing. Tom stepped forward, his rough voice low and shaky. "That jacket, was it your old man's?" She nodded silently, eyes fixed on the ground. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then one of the men removed his helmet and placed it against his chest. Another did the same. And then another. Maya looked up confused. Tom swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "We knew him." Her breath caught. You knew my dad?" Tom nodded slowly. "Sergeant Brooks, we rode with him years ago, before the accident. He used to talk about his little girl all the time, said he couldn't wait to take her on her first ride when she turned 16. His eyes softened. "Guess he kept his promise in his own way." Maya felt tears sting her eyes as she clutched the jacket tighter. She had always felt her father near when she wore it, but hearing that he had friends, brothers, who still remembered him after all these years filled a hole she didn't know was still open. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're sorry, kid, we didn't know, we just saw jacket, we didn't see the story behind it." She smiled weakly through her tears. "It's okay, people usually don't, but..." From that day something changed. The bikers started showing up at the diner more often, not to eat but to sit, talk, and make sure she was okay. They called her Little Brooks. Sometimes they helped her fix things around the diner. Sometimes they just sat in silence, sipping coffee, remembering the friend they'd lost and the daughter he'd left behind. Weeks turned into months, and the once intimidating group of bikers became local legends in a new way. They started organizing charity rides, raising money for veterans' families, visiting hospitals, delivering food to shelters. And at the front of every ride was Maya, wearing her father's jacket, her ponytail fluttering in the wind, the patch glinting like sunlight on chrome. People who had once whispered about the strange girl in the old jacket now waved at her as she passed. The laughter that once mocked her now surrounded her in warmth and pride. But it wasn't just the world that changed, it was Maya, For the first time, she didn't feel small or invisible. She realized that her pain had become her strength, that kindness could heal more than anger ever could. Her father had always told her, "Ride for something that matters." Now she understood what he meant. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom handed her a small leather patch. "It's time," he said quietly. She looked down. The patch read, "Road Angels MC, Honorary Member." Her hands trembled as she sewed it below her father's memorial patch, tears falling silently onto the fabric. When she looked up, every biker stood in a line, helmets off, heads bowed. In that moment, she wasn't just a girl in her father's jacket anymore. She was part of something bigger, a living legacy of love, loss, and kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Every click helps us share more real, emotional stories that remind the world of the power of empathy and the quiet strength inside us all. And before you go, comment below, would you have reacted differently if you were one of those bikers that day? Your words might just inspire someone who needs to hear them.